Hello everyone, hope you're having the most awesome day today. Welcome to the Film Insight channel. For today's video, we're going to discuss some more restaurants featured on the UK version of Kitchen Nightmares and reveal how they're doing now. So, sit back, relax, and without further ado, let's get right into the content guys. Clubway 41. For a Kitchen Nightmares episode, Gordon Ramsay pays a visit to Clubway 41 to bring it back on its feet. Owned by a couple named Dave Jackson and Don Brindley, their 3-floor business was once considered Blackpool's Restaurant of the Year, but the same couldn't be said now. After only 18 months, the place barely makes £5,000 a week, which isn't enough to keep the business running, and relies heavily on its cafe on the first floor for income. Quickly running out of options, the owners decided to call out to Ramsay for some much needed help. Upon his eventual arrival, the famous chef meets with the owners, then sits down to sample the food. Ordering a salmon and strawberry salad that was dreadful, a pork dish that was tough, parsnip chips that were bendy, and mashed potatoes that were actually good, Ramsay was generally unimpressed with the food. Soon after, the Kitchen Nightmares host walks around Blackpool to talk to the locals and is shocked to learn that almost no one has heard of the restaurant. Inviting a group of around 20 people into Clubway, Ramsay hopes to see how the staff will handle an influx of customers. Nigel, a cook from the cafe, was brought in to help with fulfilling orders, but it was clear that he was inexperienced. Not only did he look completely lost throughout the entire service, but he got very overwhelmed, which resulted in the food being burnt. Following the terrible service, Ramsay sets up a blind taste test with the owners in hopes of getting them to realize that their food is dreadful. By the end of this, both Jackson and Brindley admit that the restaurant's odd concoctions are gross and don't work. With that out of the way, the Kitchen Nightmares host suggests that they change the name to something like Jackson's, which they think sounds nice. He also highlights that they should move the services downstairs where it's visible from the outside to lure in more customers. Since their current menu was god-awful, the famous chef crafts a quick and easy one that could be even fulfilled in the cafe. Later on, Ramsay learns that Jackson hasn't had training since the 70s and is rusty on the basics of cooking, so he teaches him how to make some dishes with fresh local produce. Due to the fact that the business was pretty large, they only repainted the interior and added in some new tablecloths, but this still made a big difference. Post Kitchen Nightmares, the owners reported that things unfortunately got much worse after Ramsay left. It's not totally their fault though, since a bus terminal was installed directly in front of the restaurant, which not only made the area very noisy, but made it reek of fumes. To cut costs, the owners gave up on using fresh produce and only served pre-made frozen garbage. Ultimately, the place closed down in September of 2006, but was eventually purchased by new owners in 2007. They renamed it to Market Street Diner, and while it performed relatively well in the beginning, it also ended up closing down. La Riviera. In another Kitchen Nightmares episode, Gordon Ramsay heads over to the failing La Riviera to rescue it from closure. Owned by a multi-millionaire named Barry Larson, his restaurant spends a whopping £8,000 a week on food and staff costs alone. Larson, to date, has spent well over £2 million in hopes of proving that fine dining can work in Scotland. To achieve this goal, Larson hired a French chef named Loïc Lefebvre, who was supposedly trained in some of the best kitchens in France. Lefebvre handpicked each person on his team, each of which have Michelin star-studded backgrounds. Additionally, they only work with the highest quality imported ingredients, which is why the dishes are so expensive. However, it's for this very reason that the locals aren't interested in visiting and why it's empty on most nights. Desperate to realize his dream, Larson called out to Ramsay and his team for some professional guidance. Upon his eventual arrival, the famous chef expresses to the owner that much like one of his own restaurants, the locals are being put off by the pretentious food. Sitting down to sample some of the food, he has a potato soup that's extremely rich, a scallop starter that has way too many flavors, a duck dish that's oddly presented, and a dessert platter that he was given instructions on how to eat. Ramsay was left feeling appalled. Giving his feedback to the head chef, he gets very defensive and explains that he won't accept any changes to the menu. Later on, Ramsay oddly brings Larson and Lefebvre to a football field in hopes of convincing them that the overcomplicated menu needs to change, but to no avail. For a second attempt, the famous chef visits a Scottish bar with Larson to illustrate that simplicity is key, but fails yet again. As a last resort, Ramsay brings in an ex-AA inspector named David to judge a scallop dish cooked by Lefebvre and himself. While David believed that Ramsay's dish could be awarded a 4-star rosette, Lefebvre's dish would only get 2 to 3 stars since it had way too many flavors. The following day, Lefebvre admits that he was wrong and agrees to simplify the menu as well as listen to Ramsay's advice. Having a chat with the owner once more, he reveals that he wants to redecorate the restaurant at a cost of £35,000. Obviously, this was too expensive, so Ramsay suggests that they install a chef's table, which could be a unique selling point. After simplifying the dishes on the menu and significantly lowering the food cost thanks to buying local produce, the restaurant was finally ready to relaunch. Following the taping of this episode, the owner decided to rename the business to Abstract and opened another restaurant called Contrast next door. Unfortunately, since the owner was obsessed with getting a Michelin star and wasn't able to get one with the simplified menu, he reverted back to the overcomplicated dishes. No thanks to the recession, Abstract closed down in December of 2009, but it seems like Contrast is still up and running to this day. In Abstract's place, a restaurant called Castle Terrace opened up, but this closed down in June of 2020 due to the pandemic. Interestingly enough, Lefebvre and his partner Caroline Cordier opened up a restaurant called L'Atelier du Peintre, which actually received a Michelin star and tons of awards. The Sandgate Hotel. As our final entry, we're going to discuss a business that Gordon Ramsay attempted to save called the Sandgate Hotel. Owned by a married couple named Peter and Lois, they're unfortunately losing close to £2,000 a week, which is why they both work a second job to keep things afloat. Not knowing how else to move forward, they decided to reach out to a professional like Ramsay for some aid. Arriving early on into the episode, the famous chef is shocked to learn that the hotel has more than one restaurant, including a bar, a terrace, barbecue, and a Japanese restaurant. Surprisingly, they have the same chef, Stuart White, cook for every single one of their restaurants, which must be quite overwhelming. To make matters even worse, they collectively have over 168 different meals on offer, which is insanely high. Sitting down in the main restaurant, Ramsay scans the Japanese menu and is later told to go down to the basement if he wants his Japanese food. Finding this to be a ridiculous request, the famous chef speaks to the general manager, who agrees to let him eat in the main dining room. Ordering some rice from the Japanese menu that's underdone and a chicken dish that's tough and odd tasting, Ramsay is left feeling horrified with his experience. Heading into the kitchen to give his feedback, the famous chef ruthlessly critiques the food, but the head chef, White, thankfully owns up to his mistakes and apologizes. Through some discussion, the Kitchen Nightmares host learns that the hotel lost well over £30,000 in the last 4 months, which is shocking. It doesn't exactly help though that the owners treat the place like it's their own personal lounge, eating from their own supply on a daily basis. Hoping to get the staff in check, Ramsay later takes Chef White and his assistants to fish as a team-building exercise. While on the trip, the staff finally open up and admit that the menu has way too many dishes and that they're too complex to make. Catching a beautiful sea bass at the end of their day of fishing, Ramsay brings the team back and shows them how to make a simple dish with it. Serving their creation to the owners, they're not only impressed with how delicious it is, but how simple it is to make. After improving the menu, the famous chef called in a maître d'hôtel named Jean-Baptiste to help improve the service quality. Post Kitchen Nightmares, the owners reported that they have tons of new customers and are constantly selling out with the improved seafood menu. Regardless of the fact that they had a fantastic turnover of £14,000 a week, Peter and Lois decided to put up the hotel for sale since they wanted a break from the industry. Ultimately, the place was officially sold back in 2006 and changed hands another 2 times since. Well, that'll be all for today's video here on the channel. I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to drop a massive like down below and comment your thoughts. Subscribe for more content like this and turn on those sweet bell notifications for instant access to our content. Have a good one, guys.